Sorry, let me start that again. Would help if I put myself off mute. So, thanks all for coming. Unfortunately, I am a muppet and left my mic on mute. I'll get the hang of it one day. So we're going to talk about Burp Suite. What is Burp Suite? What does it mean? Why is it important? Where do you use it in that? In my view, it's probably one of the most versatile tools around. It is a tool that I love. If you had to ask me what single tool would you use if you only allow one tool, my answer would probably be Burp Suite. It is, what is it? It's pretty much a proxy. So you can have it sit between you, the client, so typically your web browser, and a server. And it doesn't just have to be things like web browsers. You can configure things like mobile to start using Burp Suite as a proxy, so you can then intercept traffic between a mobile app and the server. And then that's going to be really useful for testing. And as we'll go over it, it is a really, really, really versatile and useful tool. There's just so much you can accomplish. And the best part about it is there's the free edition, which you can do already quite a bit on. And then if you pay, in reality, it's probably expensive for personal use, but certainly in a business context, it is really, really cheap to pay for the professional version. So what I have here is the install of Kali. Now, I don't know if they've changed the latest versions, but I've certainly noticed that if you install Kali, it comes pre-installed with Burp. If you select, I think, the top 10 tools or whatever it is. But it is an older version of Burp. So what I typically do is just remove it. So you go app, remove Burp Suite. That will uninstall it. And then you can actually come to Burp Suite itself. If you look online, if I go direct connection and we just search for Burp Suites, you'll see there's the community edition. The community edition is the free version. So you can just click on it. I should actually download it straight away. If you can go here, select your operating system. So it supports pretty much all of them. And you can even run it as a standalone jar. So if you don't want to do the install and all of that, you can do that. The installers will work quite well. So I'd recommend using that. Download it. So in Linux world, it's just a script that you run, and then that will run the installer. On Windows or Mac, it's an actual installer exe or installer binary. And then that will install the latest version, and then it also knows and tries to keep itself up to date, which is great. They've done a lot of work on it over the past few months. I've really noticed a lot of change, and change for the better. It was a great tool before, and now it's even better. So if you've watched my other streams, I have configured this thing called Proxy Omega. So I highly recommend you configuring this. When I bring up Burp, I'll talk about browser configuration because there's different ways that you can use it. Personally, I like using this Proxy Omega so I can switch between Burp or switch it on and off. So what I'm going to do now is connect it to Burp. Obviously, it's not going to work because I'm not running Burp. So you start up Burp. I'm using the community version. As I said, it has a lot out of the bat. The community version, one of the things that you'll see straight away is projects aren't supported in the community version. Now, projects are going to be really important if you want to save your work. So in the community edition, any sort of traffic that's captured, any modifications you do, all of that kind of stuff goes away when you close Burp Suite. Now, obviously, they have to make money, so they only include some features in their paid-for versions. So in the paid-for version, you have the concept of projects. and you can have as many projects as you want. It works really well. You basically can give your projects a name, set where you want to install them, and then all your projects will be listed here. And that's a way of you saving your work, essentially. So any traffic that you've navigated to, any sort of edits that you've done to the traffic and all of that saved into your project, and then you can close Burp Suite and then pick it back up again. So that is one of the benefits of using the Burp Suite Professional over the Community Edition. You can essentially save your work, which is going to be really important if you, especially on a longer term engagement rather than spending like 5 minutes or something. If you're doing like CTFs and that, it's also sometimes a good way of just kind of keeping notes, seeing what you did, certain cases and that. And yeah, the configuration file, you can save different configurations in that. I've never actually really used this, but it is a handy option to have. And obviously, if you're using the Pro version, you can save it with the project itself, which is pretty handy. So you can have different configurations per project, which is quite nice. You may have a project using a specific proxy or so on and so forth, and you'll see that in a bit. All right, so you'll always be presented with those two screens when you start up Burp, and then this is Burp here. Now, this screen here is just showing a kind of demonstration of a feature within the Pro version. So with Burp Suite, you can actually do scanning, and this is really useful when you're trying to find kind of low-hanging fruit and maybe areas of interest when you're trying to scan a service or website. And as you can see, you can go in here. What it'll do is just kind of like a dash-based scan, so typical of a dash-based scan. It will find different vulnerabilities and then report on those vulnerabilities. So it gives you information about the vulnerability it's found, and gives you things like remediation, that all pretty stock standard stuff. But then you can also have things like the request and then the actual response. And the other cool thing is it does start highlighting things, which is pretty nice. As I said, this is only in the Pro version. They're included in the Community Edition. Here is like just showing you what it looks like. These aren't actual things that I've scanned. The other cool thing is within most of the areas of Burp, you have kind of this context type menu if you right click, and you can do things like send this request to the repeater or sequencer and so on and so forth, which I'll show you those features in a bit. Now, some of the things are available in the Community Edition if you have a look at the scanner. So the new scan, that's kind of the active scanning, so trying to find things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and that kind of stuff. So basically all of this kind of stuff would largely live in this new scan. There's also a notion of a live task. So you can schedule or manually run scans, but you can also have this live task. And what it does is it attempts to kind of run a scan in the background as you navigating and browsing around. So the idea behind this is if you starting to browse a site, it can then start trying to test for things like SQL injection or try to do active crawling. Now, in this case, live audits, it's only in the Pro version. So live audit is that active scanning to try to find things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, that. But you do still have the passive crawling. So it can go about and try to crawl through web pages. And you can select the tools that it will be used to track that, the live. So whether it's proxy, so this is just typical browsing, or you send things to repeater or intruder. And then you can also scope things based on the URL. So include specific URLs or exclude specific URLs, or just do everything. And then in a scan configuration, you can come about to play with these different options here as well. And then you can save it to the library. A lot of this is going to be very basic in the community edition. There's a lot more configuration and options in the pro version. So yeah, once that's running, you'll see this, and then you can actually also disable it simply just by toggling it on and off. Typically in the past, I haven't really found much with the community edition with the live tasks. It's mostly around the pro version that you'll start finding things, but it's still kind of nice to have a feature there. Now, the target point is when you start scanning. This is where you can start filtering out hosts and that you are used, or the burp actually hits. And this is good if you want to start filtering out noise or focus on specific hosts. And you can kind of keep them in scope, and like as you see here, you got different scopes and that kind of thing. Now, I don't know. So I go to my site, blogs, this should work. So off I go. And then you can see it start picking up things. So I can start adding things to like my scope. And then if you're doing scans and that, it's going to make it a lot easier. In your proxy, again, you can configure it to only show things that are in scope or out of scope and that kind of stuff. So it's going to help clean up things. Now, one of the things that, since I'm here, is if you come to this proxy, you'll see this open browser. Now, this is actually a fairly recent addition. What this does is open a browser. This is all pre-configured to talk to Burp Suite itself. So at a click of a button, you can easily open up a browser. It has all the configuration that you need for it to work with Burp, which is handy if you want a really quick and easy way of running Burp. I haven't tried installing extensions, so I don't know if those persist. I think they would, because it's underneath, it's using Chromium. But as I said, I haven't tried it. I'm pretty sure that it would. So if you have any extensions in there, it should persist them. I just prefer doing it the manual way. I don't know why. Guess habits. But as I mentioned earlier, I have this Proxy Omega set up where I can switch between the different proxy configurations. One of the other things you'll need to do if you do want to manually configure Burp is come to your settings. Actually, first, you'll need to go to whatever port you're running Burp Suite on. So in this case, I'm running on localhost, port 8080. And then you can click on this CA certificate. Now, because Burp Suite is intercepting traffic, it will intercept TLS traffic. And one of the things that it will do is create its own CA so it can intercept that TLS traffic. Now, the problem is the certificate presented to Burp, it can't then forward onto your client. Otherwise TLS would be broken. So it creates its own CA so then it can recreate the certificate and then forward that onto you. So in order for your browser or whatever client you're using to connect to Burp, you have to then trust that CA. So what you do is you go here, you download the CA, and then you come into your settings, go to privacy and security, or you can just search certificates, and it's down at the bottom here. Certificates, you'll go into view certificates, and then you'll click on import, find the file. I've already included it. Once you have included that file, it asks if you want to trust it for websites or email addresses. Up to you if you want to select both. Websites is just all you really need. And then once you've actually accepted it and trusted it, you should be able to then see it in your list of trusted authorities. So in this case, it should be under Portswigger, and there we go. And then you can actually view it, and there's the certificate itself. There are other ways of getting this certificate as well. So you can actually come into Burp Suite itself, and under the proxy, go to options. And then if you come to your actual running CA, you can actually go edit, and you can see certificate. You can generate your own one and have it in here. You can do things like self-signed certificates and that. And then you can also just download the certificate here. So you can just choose whether you want to download it, or as I said, you can generate your own one and then import in there. I don't think it'll be all too often that you probably generate one. You probably just let Burp generate it, download it, you import it, job done. So yeah, that's something you're going to have to do if you're going to use your own browser. As I said, if you come to this and go open browser, it's all pre-configured, so you don't have to worry about that. So coming back to targets, it shows you the different targets. Now, one of the things you probably would want to do is I created a repository. Let me see if I can find it. That I have a list of hosts that you probably want to add to your proxy bypass list. The reason being is these hosts here are kind of part of browser activity. So behind the scenes, your browser does different calls and all sorts of things. And if you don't kind of essentially bypass these from your proxy, they start filling your Burp Suite logs. As you can see here, they start doing this kind of thing and start filling it up with just basically noise. So it's difficult to work out, is this from the actual application or is it from a browser? So trying to put some of these into your bypass list can be really helpful. Maybe this is why I kind of prefer this option. So I've already started trying to put as many of them here as possible, so I can kind of cut a lot of that noise out. Just helpful hints. You don't have to do that, but it can hopefully help a bit. So that's that. So yeah, and then you can come in here and start viewing all your different hosts that you've had. And now some of the nice things or the recent additions that are pretty nice that Burp Suite have done is they've started including these tab things on the side here. So they give you kind of a lot of this information nicely formatted on the side. So you can see things like the different protocol, the cookies, request headers. Sure, you can get that from the raw HTML. So there's the pretty print, which is really nice, formats it nicely. So in this case, it's JSON by the looks of it. This is actual raw, so this is what it got back from the server. As you can see, that's maybe a bit harder to see, whereas the pretty print puts it out nicely. It's just really tweaks like this that make Burp Suite such a great tool. Sorry, I'm just reading some of the comments. One of them, is there any reason you're doing this over the built-in browser? Yeah, as I mentioned, I have it, I guess. I've never really used the built-in browser. Probably should try that. And yeah, so coming up, nice built-in kind of beautifier. One of the other cool things is if you come to the response, there's this render. It's probably not going to work there because this is an API. What render does is, there we go. It will actually render the HTML on a kind of page. Now, this is going to be really helpful, especially if you start using some of the other features, which I'll come on to, where you want to make a change and see how it reflects on the page. Otherwise, like if you don't use this, you have to go there, make a change, probably view it back in your browser, see how it works, come back, make a change. It just like adds a lot of extra steps and just becomes a bit cumbersome. Whereas if you do use this feature here, this like allows you to see the change pretty instantaneously, which is really, really, really helpful. This is probably going to be more interesting in something like the repeater, where you would make a change, view the outcome, make a change, view the outcome. So yeah, that's targets. You have things like scope, so you can include different hosts in scope. I think you can even include different URLs in that in scope. I've not used this too much. I've not used it as much as I should. But yeah, and then these are the kind of things that you probably focus on for the pro version for the scanning. But probably the areas that you got to focus most on are the proxy, intruder, repeater, and then maybe even sequencer, decoder bits, and then compare it. So let's go into those. So probably the area you're going to live the most is the proxy area. So this is where all the requests that go through Burp get logged and show up. So you can click on them at the bottom, nice side by side. You got the request, you got the response, and then you got all these cool little things here. I think I was trying to see the other day if you could decode on the side. I'm pretty sure if you highlight some of like base64, you can actually decode on the side here, which is a really nice feature rather than having to context switch. I guess I got to find base64 somewhere. But it's really nice, and as I said before, you can do things like send to repeater. You can also do things like show response in browser. So that's probably not going to work. But if we go here, and is this HTML? Yeah, so this is HTML. So what you can do is click on this, show response in browser. You basically copy this, and then you go into your browser, you paste it. Oh, what's going on? Yeah, you paste that, and then that shows you the actual response from Burp itself, which is a really handy tool. As I mentioned, you got this render option here, which is really, really great, but sometimes you might not be able to do what you need. So for instance, maybe you want to view it further in something like developer tools and that, you have that option to then show it in your browser. So your browser would actually then take this output, which can be helpful. So yeah, you can do things like searches. Now, with the community edition, the search is pretty basic. It's limited basically to your request and response. Now, this is great, but it is a bit daunting when you want to search everything. So say, for instance, you go navigate to a site and you want to find, I don't know, a certain text in that site. Ordinarily, you come up to the top here, you click on the filter, and then you could search by everything. So all the requests, all the responses, and it would show, basically filter these, and then you can search in it. That is really, really useful. Unfortunately, that's only in the Pro version. This is like one feature I really miss in the Pro version that's not in the Community Edition, because it can be a really, really useful feature. But at least you can still search in individual requests and responses. Another thing that sometimes catches me out is this filter by MOM type. So you'll see CSS is not selected. Basically, if it's not selected here, it will not show up in this list here. So for example, if I take out script, and I don't know, Flash, we don't have Flash anymore. If I apply that now, you should see there, it starts filtering that down. So it is good if you maybe only want to focus on scripts. So you can only show, you're only going to show JavaScript things, but it does catch you out when it comes out of the default, and you don't have things like CSS selected. And you're like, why is CSS not shown? It's probably because you're not selected it here. I think there was one that goes all, but also all binary. This is also a common one. So especially things like CTS and that, where they don't really, it's like a weird binary name or something like that. If you select that will then show. You can also filter it on things like file extensions and that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, there's other options for filtering, which is pretty handy. So yeah, just keep that in mind. That's often caught me out. The other thing is WebSockets. So if the site is using WebSockets, those will be logged in here. It's much like the history, very similar. And then you got your options. So already kind of covered the certificates. You can have multiple listeners. So I think you can have multiple ones. So if I want to bind this to, I don't know, 81, it should, both of them, yeah. And different interfaces. So obviously this is only a local host, but you can also bind it to your external interface. Request handling, so you can do all sorts of things like this, and different options. Best just go through it. This one actually is pretty cool because you can also then test weaker TLS protocols if you want to. And there's other options down further along that you can also configure the TLS protocols. The next part on here is the intercept, both the requests and responses. So with the proxy, you can do what's intercept. So the point of this is your browser or app or whatever you're trying to proxy, you can stop the request, either view it or modify it, and then you can send it on. But you can also then say, hey, flag this, flag the response to this request because I want to edit it. So this is typically probably where you might, I don't know, see a request, either view it or modify it, depending on your nature. But then you might also want to either view or modify the response to that. And this is kind of where you want to do that. So if I go here, it should now, there we go. So here we go. I've intercepted that request. I can actually make any additions here, or sorry, any modifications. So I could do things like, I don't know, remove this cookie. Don't know what that's going to do. And then forward is send the request on. Drop is actually don't send it, just drop it, ignore it. Under action, you'll see there's different options here. Typically what you do is often do intercept the response to this. So what this is saying is when Burp Suite gets a response for this request, it will then intercept that response. So now I can go forward, and there's a response. So this is the actual response to their request sent. So you could either use this to do things like render and see the outputs, or you would then further modify it. Depends. It's going to obviously very much depend on your situation. And then to turn it off, you just click on that button. Now, one of the things you also probably want to do, especially for sites using WebSockets, and you're not really interested in them, I've had this quite often, I would disable these because otherwise every single WebSocket call is going to be intercepted, and it can be click, 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 click to forward. You can also then set up these rules. So you can tell Burp to only intercept on specific URLs or specific domains. Like, it's entirely up to you. You can configure it here. Similarly, you can then also configure it to only intercept the responses based on certain things. If you do this, then you don't always have to then find the request, go select and intercept that specific response. You can add a kind of filter here. So that's going to be really useful. There's other things that you can do in here. So you can do response modification. So you can do kind of automated things to a response. So this here, for example, is converting HTTPS links into HTTP, SSL stripping. You can remove secure flags from cookies and all of that. And this would do this to all the responses. The other thing is you can also then add these match and replace. So if it finds this, then replace it with this. So kind of building upon that. And then TLS pass-throughs. Now, there may be some times where you don't want to intercept the TLS requests and responses. So what it'll do is still go via burp sweep, but it'll just send it straight through. So it won't actually do the interception. So in this case, just to show you, if we go to GitHub, you'll see the certificate is signed by Portsburger, right? Now, if I add GitHub to the pass-through, so github.com on port 443, button, github.com on 443. If I now refresh this, it should be the original certificate from GitHub. Is it not? That's weird. It's weird. Maybe I got to clear cache or something. I don't know what's going on there, but that's the idea behind that. It should then just send it straight through and not intercept it. I don't know why that's doing that. Maybe to browse the cache. Oh, but yeah, that's the whole point of that. And then you got these other options down here that you can have a look. Seldom really use them. So that's that. So yeah, the other things you can do is just send it onto the different context menus. Also, if you edit it, so I want to find that one that I edited. Usually a lot easier if I find it. Oh, I can't find it now. This one. Oh, so you got this nice thing here that shows you it's edited. And then you can also see, so this is the original request, and then you can actually also go and view the edited request. So this is the one that I actually modified and sent. So that's pretty handy to have, and you got a nice little flag here. You obviously also got these other fields here, so status, length, and mom type, and that can be quite useful as well. So that's a proxy. You'll probably spend quite a bit of time in there. Oh, this was the decoding that I was talking about. So yeah, you can do things like base64, base64 URL and all that kind of stuff on the side, which is really, really, really handy. Otherwise, in the past, you would have to actually send it to the decoder. So again, it's that context switching where you've got it now nicely all there. So intruder is another feature. So if we send that to intruder, you can actually add things manually, I think. But the easiest way is just to right click on a request that you want to send to an intruder, and then just send it to intruder. And then I'll actually send the request to intruder. Now, what you would use intruder to do is kind of automated type approach to testing something. So it has a notion of these kind of flags, placeholders, I don't know, whatever you want to call them. And the idea behind this is if you clear them, you just select where you want. So maybe, for instance, I want to change that and add it. So now that becomes a placeholder. Now there's different types of modes. I always get the modes mixed up. There's good documentation online of the different modes. So I recommend go reading that up. It will do a far better explanation than I can. But I typically stick with sniper if I only have one. Then you got things like pitchfork, which is good if you got multiple. So if we add another one there. So you basically set your payload positions, placeholders, whatever you want to call them. Then you come into your payloads. Now this is where you start adding in what you're going to put in those placeholders. And you can select, in this case, the pitchfork. You can set for both where is, say, for instance, I use sniper. I think there's only one that you can use. Yeah. So you got to just use a different mode for your different type of attack. And you have a payload type. So the payloads could be things like a word list or a incremental list of numbers, or yeah, all of these different things. So in this case, say for instance, that is just text-based. So we may just say, okay, well, it's a simple list. You can load, rock you or whatever it is from the word list, or a Durbus word list from that file, and then it'll place all of those words into here. And then when you actually run the attack, or you put in a placeholder each one of those words. And then similarly for the next one, it will do the same thing. So the different modes are, it might start off with the first list, do all of them, then substitute one in the second list, or it might do both at the same time. Again, if you read online, there's a far better explanation than I can. So yeah, you can also have lists such as numbers. So if we do this like numbers, where is it? You can start off at a specific number, 10, and then 1. So it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so on and so forth. That would be good for kind of idle type attacks. Yeah, and then you can do this different payload processing, so you can just select different rules and all sorts of things. My recommendation is just go play around with them, see what works for you. Also worth calling out is, if you saw if you go to things like a simple list, you'll see there's this pro version. Now, the pro version includes lists that allow you to do things like, or attempts to do simple SQL injection or cross-site scripting payloads. But unfortunately, that's only in the pro version. Then yeah, you have things like payload encoding. So once you've set that up, you go to this here, start attack, and off it'll go open up a new window, and then I'll actually show the items. So rather than trying to attack GitHub and make them upset, let me try my blog. So if we send this to intruder, I don't know, what are we going to do? Just make this a number. So if we go to payloads, and we'll set that as a number and go 1, 2, 5, and then 1. Another thing to note with the free version, the number of consecutive requests in that is reduced. So it will take a lot longer with the community edition than the pro version. And you can start tweaking a lot of those in things like your resource pool, which is max concurrence loads. See, like you can't increase them, I think those are only set via the pro version. And then in the options, you also have further options here of different things like error handling and that kind of thing. So if we now start the attack, yeah, so some of the attacks are throttled. For things like CTFs and that, you're probably not going to notice too much. Now, so what it does is off it goes, it sends off the requests. So if you actually go view, the first one is going to be the original request. So I'll send that so you can get the response. Then it will start the attack. So if we have a look, let's make that a bit bigger. So if we go look at the request, it should still be document. And then you can see it starts sending 1, 2. You can color code it 3, 4, 5. And then you can also see the response. Now, the handy thing here is you can actually now see there's a difference in the length in the response. And this is where you start looking for things like different response codes or different response lengths, because then that means there's a difference in the response. Typically you're looking for quite a significant change. Here's probably a few bytes. So it could just be something simple as a different timestamp. So, but that's where things like render can also really help. So you can see the difference between them. So in this case, probably not anything different. Yeah, it's still rendering the same. You can do things like, where was it? The grep. So this is probably where I've tried to work this. I couldn't really get it working that well, but this is kind of thing where you can start automating it and trying to get specific text that you're looking for and get it to show up here. So I don't know, like a login page, you're trying to see welcome X or whatever. You might grep for that. So that's then highlighted because then you've logged in successfully. So that's Intruder, quite a really useful tool. As you see here with the Pro version, you can save this. Unfortunately, with the Community Edition, you can't. So yeah, that's going to be really useful. And then the other feature that you're going to use quite a bit is the repeater. So it's kind of similar in the fact that it will send a modified request, but in this case, we can just modify the request, send it on, and then see the response. You can also just add new ones, although I've never really successfully managed that. So you can go here, add a new request, put in the host ports, whether to use HTTPS or not, and then put in the request, and then you can see the response. And you can also do the same with WebSockets. Obviously, unlike the Intruder, it's not automated. So this is where you would find an interesting request here. So for that, you can go send to repeater. I typically just send it just to make sure it's working, see the response, and then, I don't know, take one of those away, see what happens. There, 404, not found. You can also use these back buttons, which is quite nice. So what this does is kind of goes back through the different requests that you do, so you can kind of undo things, or you can go forward. And then if you got any, if there are redirects, it will show a nice button here, follow redirect. So then you can just go through and follow that redirect. Sequencer is useful more for testing things like session level entropy and that kind of stuff. So it will try to do a multiple set of requests and then analyze those. So if we try send something, try send this to a sequencer, and you can start. So there's different options you can do. Yeah, as you can see here, there's the FIP stuff. So that's more around session management and entropy and all that good stuff. You can go analyze now. So yeah, you need tokens. So I'm trying to remember how this works. Thank you. Yeah, so you basically specifying where the token is. For this. So if you had like a session cookie, you would specify where it starts, where it ends, or you can use regex. And then you'd go start live capture, and it'll go bank off the however many requests. So in this case, it'll just carry on. I think there is an option to auto analyze. Yeah, so when it gets 800, it will then analyze the different tokens, whatever you asked it to analyze, and then I'll see things like different entropy. As I said, you're probably really going to use this more around things like session tokens, making sure there's sufficient entropy. Yeah, it does all this stuff. I don't delve in this too much, but it is still pretty interesting. Obviously, if you're just going to have the same result coming back, your entropy is going to be pretty bad. But this probably things like CSRF tokens and that. Decoder, now this is where you can do things like base64 or URL decoding. So what you can do is, I think, let's try that. So you can here, as I said, you can do it on the side here. I don't know why it sometimes appears and doesn't appear. I'm going to look into that. But you can right click, go send to decoder, and then you can try it. The smart decoding doesn't really work that well, but you can try the different ones. So this obviously isn't base64. You can then also just show it as text or hexadecimal. And then you can also encode as well. Also has hashing, the different hashing algorithms. These types of things are probably use CyberChef a bit more, but it is handy to still have there for quick and easy ones. Comparer can be a really useful tool as well. So say, for instance, you send 2 requests and you want to compare them side by side. So let's try fire off 2 requests here. So 1, 2. So there should now be 2 requests to that. So what you can do is right click, send to comparer, either the request or the response. Let's go response. And there we go. So now these 2 will be in the comparer. And then you can compare words or bytes. Most often you probably just do words. And then it will actually highlight the difference between the 2. So we can see this request ID is changed, the E tag, and obviously the time. And then you can scroll down and it will highlight the different areas that it's changed or added or deleted, which is kind of useful to have, especially if you're making a change and when you see the result and it's hard to spot. Logger, so this just logs all your requests and responses, and you can disable it. Now, probably where you want to start looking at disabling these types of things, or also your proxy logs, especially if you're saving projects, you can clear it. So you maybe want to do this. Once the file starts getting a certain size, Burp can slow down quite a bit. And it's understandable. There's a lot of data in there. So just be aware of that. Extenders, probably the next area that you're going to look at quite a bit. So this is where the plugins reside. So before you start that, there's kind of a few things that you need. So jar, kind of optional. I don't think I've ever really need to set this one, but you need things like Python. Everyone's favorite, even better. Combine Java and Python and you get Jython. I told that people that and they just cringe. But that's what some of the plugins use. They are developed in that language, Jython, combination of Python, Java and Python. So what you do is just go online, search for Jython jar. There should be an official site. You download that jar file and then you just point this at that jar file. Similarly, someone decided it was a good idea to combine Java and Ruby to get JRuby. Well, same thing. Go online, search for JRuby jar, download the jar from the official site, and then point this file at it. So once you have that, you'll pretty much be sorted for the extensions. Now you'll see there's this BA BAP store, and this is where all the extensions reside that are easy to install. You just click on the extension and then you can click on install. There's things like ratings, popularity, and when they were last updated. Unfortunately, some of the extensions are only available in the Pro version, which is on the side here. I guess it makes sense. So things like your scanners kind of would be defeating the point if you could install a scanner in the free version and then you could do scanning. So those are only available in the Pro version. But there are still ones available on the free version. So what I recommend is go through, have a look for yourself. There's loads and loads, and I think you can also see, I don't know how many are available outside of this store. I've never really had a need to go outside the store, but there is the manual install as well. Yeah, and then some of them that are handy are things like JWT. So there are JWT decoders and that kind of stuff. SAML decoders. I forgot which one it was. I think SAML Radio is pretty good. It allows you to import your own certificates, or the certificate to do the SAML, the actual certificate, so you can then do modification and all of that kind of stuff. Would only recommend any sort of test environment certificate. Don't do a production one. But if you want to test like signing and that, you can also do self-signing certificates and all of that stuff. And yeah, there's a bunch of other things out there. So I think there's even Wayback Machine. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, loads and loads and loads of cool stuff in there. So definitely go have a look at it. APIs, I've actually never really looked at this. I think this is for developing it. And then once you've actually installed all the extensions, sometimes I think the configuration may be here, but then other times you'll see like a window or a new tab. Just depends on the actual plugin. But here's where also there's log output and error logs and that are available should the plugin not work properly. In the options here, there's not many options, but yeah. So coming towards the end, the options itself, as I mentioned right at the beginning, you can do project-based options or kind of more global options. So project would be specific to individual projects. It's probably not really useful for the community version, because you can't save projects. But if you have the pro version, you can have different properties per different project. So as I mentioned, things like proxies, you could have different proxies for different projects. Hostname resolution, pretty cool. So you can override hostname entries here, try to force man in the middle type attacks or whatever. Obviously depends on the stuff that you're testing. But yeah, upstream proxy, platform authentication. So if you've got any sort of authentication, like domain authentication and that kind of stuff that you need to do, you can do that here. Yeah, and you can do things like drop out of scope requests, which may be helpful also again to eliminate that noise. All of these different options, I don't know what they all do. Generally, I've not had the need to do much of them, but yeah, they're all here. Have a play around, have a look around. TLS is pretty cool, so you can have these different options around the TLS. You can also allow client certificates, which sometimes may be needed for client certificate authentication. The other cool thing here is all the certificates that Burp Suite then gets, it logs here, so you can actually view the original certificates. So in this case, here's the GitHub one, which I still don't know why it didn't show the original one for the TLS interception bypass. But anyway, and then the cookie jar. So this is where it starts storing all the cookie values in that. So if you open this up, you'll see there's all the different cookies here. Probably the most interested one here is the session ID type cookies. These are the ones you'd probably be the most interested in. And then, yeah, you can edit them and modify them and that. And you can also specify where they are captured and updated. So this is handy if you maybe want to go browse somewhere and you don't want them to be updated, or you only want to update it via some special thing that you're doing in the repeater. It's all there. Macros is also pretty cool feature. I've not worked too much with them. I've tried to. I need to do more work on this. But this is like kind of starting down the realm of doing some sort of programmatic type approach. So a good example where you probably use a macro is CSRF tokens. So trying to do a request, get the CSRF token, store that token, and then be able to put that into a request. That's probably a good example of where you start looking to use the macro. And yeah, you can use this to record it and configure it. I've tried to do it. I'm going to get better at it. But it's a really handy feature to have there. And then under miscellaneous, there are different things. So schedule tasks. Collaborator is actually really cool tool as well. So this kind of more along the lines of blind type vulnerabilities. So a good example is blind cross-site scripting. Where this would become a problem is if you have probably more external or totally separated inputs. So you have a page that you may display raw events, and then you have input from somewhere else that has those events generated. Could either be an API or another page or an actual file upload or something like that. Now, when the tool's running, it's not going to know, hey, I put this cross-site scripting vulnerability, but I didn't get a response. Cross-site scripting vulnerability, but I didn't get a response, so it's potentially a false negative. What it can do is have this Burp Suite collaborator, which is basically listening for that flag whenever it's loaded. So say I upload a file on some page, navigate around. After 10 minutes, I navigate to the page that displays all the events. Suddenly that cross-site scripting will trigger. But I won't know that because it'll kind of be behind the scenes type thing. Well, this is where the collaborator comes in, because then they will make a call to the collaborator telling, hey, your payload executed somewhere else. And then that can give you details here. So that's kind of a really useful thing. You can configure it. You can even host your own private collaborator. So if you don't actually expose anything externally as well. And yeah, here's things you can do with login and that. And then options around the embedded browser. So much of these options are also then available at a higher level, at the global level, user level. And yeah, these are probably where you're going to look more towards if you're using the community edition. So things like proxy, your different TLS, client certificates, and then of course changing the different things around the way it looks. So you can change dark light mode. They made it pretty cool now. Shouldn't have done that. I was gonna say they made it pretty cool where you didn't have to. You no longer need to restart Burp Suite for the different theme to take place. So that is pretty much Burp in a very kind of high-level introduction. One other thing to point out here is there's this loan option with things like Burp Suite, the Portswigger Academy, or they got a tutorial here. Go look at them. The Portswigger Academy is awesome. It's really useful. It's got a load of good stuff. So I would recommend going to look there, and it's all nicely done within Burp. So you can just click on the button and away it'll go and show you all these lovely things. So they've got different labs covering things like cross-site scripting and all that stuff. So hopefully this has been somewhat useful. Apologies, I'm still fairly rusty on Burp. I haven't used it that much lately, and a lot's changed. But hopefully I've given you enough to cover off kind of the higher level things, get you on your way, get you at least starting to use it. Some may even question why you would use Burp over Zap. So I'll try to do a session on Zap at some point. But personally, I prefer Burp. And I know others prefer Burp. It's just preference, really. And Burp to me just seems better organized and structured, but that's just me. Zap is still a great tool. It does more or less the same thing as Burp, and it's free. It can do scans and that as well, but I still think Burp's a better, well-rounded product. But that's my personal opinion. Go have a look, play around. Certainly recommend downloading Zap as well. Bit harder to work, but as I said, I'll try to do a session on that. But certainly download at least the free version of Burp and give it a play around, and hopefully this has helped somewhat. I hope you all have a good one. Catch you later. Bye.
Swear I won't forget this, why do I regret this? In my mind reckless, thoughts are feeling endless. Sitting up, I'm breathless, anxiety's infectious. I feel so defenseless, betrayed and embarrassed. I hate being open, I hate being broken. I feel like an ocean filled up with emotion. Anger ain't a potion, rub it on like lotion. I can feel it soaking, reopen, the scars have awoken. I can't move on till I let go. I feel so lost, never at home. Need to be strong, every breath hold. Cause I can't move on till I let go. I can't move on till I let go. I feel so lost, never at home. Need to be strong, every breath hold. Cause I can't move on till I let go.